Augustus, the ambitious young statesman who defeated the enemies of Rome, founded the empire, won the hearts and minds of his people, and was later deified for his glorious contributions to Roman history. Although some sources claim the first emperor as a villain, he was considered a hero in the Roman world who fought for what was best for Rome. To properly assess the reign of Augustus and draw conclusions on whether or not he should be seen as a hero or a villain, several aspects of his life must be investigated, including his approach to the Roman political situation and what the situation was in the mid-1st century BC, the effects of his rule on society, the movements he made to stabilize Rome, and the changes he made to the governmental system in creating the empire. The long-term achievements of Augustus and the significant changes he made to Rome must also be considered, as they are the lasting influence of his reign on the empire that lasted over 1400 years after his death, to the fall of Constantinople in the east. In order to pass judgment on Augustus, it is necessary to understand the important events of his life, the political undertakings, social movements, and military campaigns. He was born Gaius Octavius to an old and wealthy patrician family of the gens Octavii in 63 BC. He was later cared for by his grandmother Julia Caesaria, the sister of Julius Caesar. An ambitious young man, he took advantage of his ties to Caesar and campaigned with him in Hispania in 46 BC at the age of 17, where he made a good impression on Caesar. After Julius Caesar's famous assassination on the Ides of March 44 BC by a conspiracy led by some leading senators of Rome, Octavius ignored the counsel of his army and travelled from Apollonia to Italy, finding that Caesar had declared him prime beneficiary in his will. He was posthumously adopted as Caesar's son and heir, as he had no legitimate children, and so Octavius also took his name, Gaius Julius Caesar, although for convenience historians refer to him at this stage as Octavian. Octavian used his newfound affluence to bolster his private funds by securing large sums of money from military coffers before arriving in Rome, where Mark Antony, a Caesarian general, was negotiating peace following the assassination. Octavian was inducted as a member of the Senate in 43 BC and given imperium, the power to command troops. When Mark Antony's ambitions for power led to him besieging the Roman town of Mutina for control over Cisalpine Gaul, he was outlawed by the Senate, and Octavian with his army, along with the current consuls Hirtius and Pansa, were charged with bringing him to justice. Octavian was made consul soon after his victory, and absolving Mark Antony, he established the second triumvirate with Marcus Lepidus and Mark Antony, a rule of 3. Proscriptions were issued by the triumvirs as an act of cleansing Rome of unwanted senators and equites. Among the proscriptions of over 2,000 nobles was Cicero, the anti-Caesarian senator who had supported Octavian against the political slander of Mark Antony. The triumvirs were successful at the Battle of Philippi in 42 BC, where the assassins Brutus and Cassius were defeated. But Octavian's reputation was smeared after resettling the veteran troops in Italy, displacing many Roman citizens. The empire was then divided between them, with Lepidus ruling North Africa, Antony in the east, and Octavian in the west. In Rome, patrician marriages were strategic political alliances as much as they were personal relationships, and so Octavian's divorce of Mark Antony's stepdaughter provoked Antony's wife Fulvia to militarily oppose Octavian, only to be defeated at Perusia and exiled in 40 BC, heightening tensions between Octavian and Antony. The son of Pompey, Sextus Pompeius, was seen as a threat to the triumvirate, and after a turbulent period between 39 and 36 BC, he was eventually defeated by the combined forces of Lepidus and Octavian's general Agrippa at the Battle of Norlochus in Sicily. After this event, Lepidus felt confident to gain more prestige by claiming Sicily. However, he was quickly disempowered after the defection of a major portion of his troops to Octavian. Lepidus was shown mercy by Octavian and granted the title of Pontifex Maximus, head of religious matters which he would practice in exile and no longer as triumvir. Meanwhile, Antony had become acquainted with Cleopatra VII, Queen of Egypt, in hope of attaining military support from her, and also had children by her. As Antony bestowed titles and privileges on Cleopatra, such as Queen of Kings, Octavian looked on judgmentally and launched attacks on Antony in the Senate for his close dealings with the Egyptian queen. After sending his own sister, Octavia, to marry Antony, she was returned to Rome, angering Octavian and the Senate that he would choose an Oriental paramour over a Roman woman. From 36 to 32 BC, Octavian launched waves of propaganda against Antony, claiming he would step down from the triumvirate if Antony would do so also, which Antony refused, only fueling Octavian's cause. Late in 32 BC, Octavian controversially breached the sanctity of the Vestal Virgin's sanctuary when he stormed the precinct and seized Antony's will, revealing to the public that he had promised significant portions of Roman territory to his children by Cleopatra, providing a solid reason for Octavian to wage war on Antony and his queen. Octavian and his general Agrippa advanced on Antony and Cleopatra's forces by land and sea in Greece, where they were temporarily stationed, climaxing at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, when Antony and Cleopatra narrowly escaped Agrippa's fleet and sailed back to Egypt. After another defeat at Alexandria, Antony fell on his sword, and Cleopatra poisoned herself with an asp, leaving Octavian victorious and Egypt in his possession. He chose to murder Antony's eldest son and spare his daughters, also inviting Julius Caesar and Cleopatra's son Caesarion to Rome, where he was executed. With Lepidus in exile and Mark Antony dead, Octavian celebrated a triumph in Rome and unofficially established a principate. He was given consulship alongside Agrippa, and for the next 4 years until 27 BC, he gave more power back to the Senate, reversing the lawlessness that arose after the periods of civil strife and ensuring that he was not seen as a king, a concept looked down upon in Rome since 510 BC, when the last king was deposed. At the satisfaction of the plebeians, extra power and titles were awarded to Octavian under the first settlement, where he was granted substantial military privileges and the right to wear the civic crown, a piece usually used only when a general was celebrating a triumph. He was also granted the titles Augustus and Princeps, Augustus being a religious title, while Princeps meaning first citizen, the first Roman emperor. As Augustus expanded the empire further into Europe from 30 to 20 BC, Asia and Africa, and also forming a buffer of client states to secure peaceful borders, he continued to gain the favour of the Senate and people. A second settlement was made in 23 BC to increase his imperium, and he was also granted tribunicia potestas, the power to introduce legislation into the Senate. With these powers, he was able to establish firm imperial traditions that lasted to the end of the Roman Empire nearly 1500 years later. A major achievement of Augustus was his success at establishing Pax Romana, the Roman peace, which lasted 200 years. With this peace, Augustus was able to turn his attention to internal affairs for the next few decades, continuing to strengthen Roman society and government, while also securing an heir with Tiberius Claudius, his stepson. Augustus married Tiberius to Agrippa's widow and groomed him to be his successor, sending him on important missions into Germania, receiving the powers of a tribune and proconsul, and twice being awarded with a triumph. Augustus died while visiting his father's death place on the 19th of August, 14 AD, and was succeeded by Tiberius after an enormous funerary procession to Rome.